I'm Leslie Millwee. I am a wife, a mother. I work for a nonprofit for cancer awareness, and I was sexually assaulted by Bill Clinton.
When did this happen? When did you first encounter Bill Clinton and why?
I was a television reporter. I started with the station when I was 19 and turned 20, and I worked in Fort Smith and Fayetteville, Arkansas, for a TV channel there. And he was the governor of Arkansas, and I interviewed him and spent time with him a lot as a result of the Fort Chaffee, all the Cuban refugees that came in to Fort Chaffee. And as a result, he spent a lot of time there. And that was my beat. That was the place that I went to nearly every day to do a story.
So Fort Chaffee, you're working in a local TV station. First of all, you went by a different name back then, correct?
I did. I was known as Leslie Derrick, and I worked there. I probably interviewed Bill Clinton probably 20 times during the course of my year there. I interviewed him on social events and things that were happening within the state, and then Fort Chaffee happened in the spring. And then as a result of him being there so much, I also had the opportunity to spend time with him because he spent a lot of time there.
And then did you interview him inside your TV station as well?
I did. I interviewed him at the TV station, I interviewed him in the community, and I interviewed him at Fort Chaffee.
When did he start acting inappropriately toward you, and what did he do exactly?
When I first noticed his behavior toward me, I was in the TV station, and we had a very large newsroom. And he would single me out, and after I met him the first time, he would come up to me, and he always would approach me and say something like, "Hey, pretty girl, how are you today?" He would follow me around the station. Just made me feel uncomfortable. It was a situation where it was kind of a joke at our TV station. My cameraman and some other people that worked there would say, "I think he really likes you." And because he would always single me out when he first walked in. But he started making inappropriate gestures. We were responsible for editing our own stories, and we had a very small editing room. And he had touched my shoulder and done other things to me before in public around other people, but that was just his nature to be very, demonstrative and touchy-feely, as I call it. But he followed me into an editing room the first time I remember that it was very small. There was a chair. I was sitting in a chair. He came up behind me and started rubbing my shoulders and running his hands down toward my breasts. And I was just stunned. I froze. I asked him to stop. He laughed. That happened on 3 occasions, and each time it escalated where the aggressive nature of his touch and what he was doing behind me escalated.
You say Bill Clinton comes in. He's touching you, you say, but what specifically did he do to you?
He came up behind me. It's very close quarters. You have to understand that his private parts were right at my neck. I was sitting in a chair. He's touching me on my shoulders, working his hands down from behind, and he starts to hunch me. He did that the first time. The second time, which was probably a week or so later, I did approach him after he did it the first time, and I said, "Please don't ever do anything like that to me again. It's very offensive, it's upsetting, and I do not want you to do that." He laughed. And the second time, about a week later, he came in. He made a beeline immediately for me. I excused myself, went to the editing room, and he came in behind me, started hunching me to the point that he had an orgasm. He's trying to touch my breasts, and I'm just sitting there very stiffly, just waiting for him to leave me alone. And I'm asking him the whole time, "Please do not do this. Do not touch me. Do not hunch me. I do not want this." and he finished doing what he was doing and walked
Was
out.
he took out his private parts?
I do not know. I did not see that. I could feel what he was doing from behind me. I do not know if he had taken, private parts out, or if he was doing it. I assumed he was doing it through the material, but I could be wrong.
About how long did that last?
Probably 3 to 5 minutes, and I'm asking him the whole time to please stop. Please don't do this. I would not turn around. I was just praying somebody would come in through the door, knock on the door, but it was over pretty quickly. He actually did that on 2 occasions.
He did it another time after that?
He did it another time after that, a
And
total
what
of 3 times.
specifically did he do on the third time?
Basically the same thing he did on the second time. Came in, hunched me from behind, grabbing my shoulders, and, having an orgasm and then leaving. I was crying. I came out of the third time it happened. It was just so overwhelming. I waited a few minutes. I came out. I went into the ladies' room. I was crying and very upset. And we had a lady that had a local show there, and she actually came into the bathroom, an older lady, and she said, "Honey, what is wrong?" And I said, "I've just had a really bad experience, and I don't really want to talk about it, but I'm very upset, and if you'll just leave me alone for a few minutes, I'll be fine." But I was very visibly upset.
The governor of Arkansas, the most high-profile person, obviously, in the TV station for those few minutes or however long he was there, nobody else in the station noticed that he was gone or that he was in the editing room? They didn't ask questions after?
I think there were a couple of times my cameraman always kind of joked. In fact, he and the news director, it was kind of a joke. "I think he likes you." And of course, I did not tell the scope of what was happening. I believe my news director and the cameraman knew something was amiss. I don't think in their wildest dreams they realized the gravity of the situation. I think they knew that he liked me, that he followed me around. He would seek me out. He would come into the station and say, "Where's Leslie? Is she here right now?" I have no doubt that was noticed. That was very visible. But I don't think they had any idea what was going on, and I wouldn't have told them. I was mortified and so upset. I didn't know who to turn to. I'm thinking in my mind, this is the governor of Arkansas. The first, he's telling me one of the first things this man tells you when he meets you is, "Hi, I'm Bill Clinton, and I'm going to be the President of the United States." That is one of the first real conversations we ever had, is he told me that.
Can you describe the editing room for us? Your chair, the tables, the equipment, the size?
The chair was like a desk chair. I believe it was some sort of a swivel chair. Had a low back. So, he's relatively tall. I'm sitting down at the table, and the space is so small, literally him standing behind me, he is right up against me, brushed up against me, and I can feel his genitals on my neck area as he's holding me. The thing too, I felt like I was being held in place. That's one way I could describe it. I know my husband asked me one time, "Why didn't you just push him away and get up?" You have to understand, his hands were here. They were going down and trying to touch my breast. I believe I was grabbing him with my hands at one time, saying, "Stop doing this." But I didn't feel like I was in a position, there wasn't really enough room to get up and get out of there until he exited. So I felt very trapped in that room, that there was nothing I could do to stop him once he started. And when I realized he was, hunching me, performing a sex act on my neck area, I just froze and I didn't do anything until, till he was ready to go. I just sat there.
Now, if this happened, you say not once, not twice, but 3 times, why go back to the editing room knowing he was in the building? Why go back to the room where you say you were assaulted again and again?
Well, for one thing, the first time he did not complete the sex act. It was more touching and fondling. The second time I went in, I was stunned. And I believe the third time he was not even in the building when I went in to finish my story. If my memory serves me correctly, he had gone into the television station and was seeking me out. Where is Leslie? And in fact, like I said earlier, I believe that I thought it was somebody coming in to rush me along with the story. I didn't even realize he was in the building, so I wouldn't have thought that was him that came in. I didn't even turn around and look when somebody came in because I was on a very specific deadline. I had a story to get to air within a few minutes. So this all happened. He came in. I did not realize it was him till he leaned over and whispered in my ear, "It's me, I'm here," something like along those lines. And I realized, but believe me, it never happened again after that. I made sure.
Okay, so there's the editing room, but it didn't end there, you say.
I was so afraid at one time that my grandmother came, and she lived in Oklahoma, a couple of hours away. And she would come and stay with me for weeks at a time because I absolutely didn't want to be alone. He was always saying things like, we're going to get together and things like that. Well, I took that as to he was going to seek me out. I didn't know if, and I didn't know when, and I didn't know what, but I really felt like that was what he was referring to.
And did he?
He did. He, one night at 10:30, knocked on my apartment door. My grandmother was there with me. He knocked on the door for probably 5-10 minutes, knocking, calling my name, saying, "I know you're home. Please answer the door." I did not answer the door.
Bill Clinton, governor of Arkansas, knocking on your private apartment door, you say.
Correct.
Why do you think he did that? What do you think he wanted?
Well, I think he wanted sex. I don't know. He had been very aggressive toward me the last couple of weeks before that happened. I feel he was really, I think he was very irritated and surprised that I wasn't interested in his, his offers and his approaching me. And I think he was there to, I don't know what would have happened. Always in my young mind, keep in mind I'm 20 years old. I see this as a threat. I feel like, maybe he's going to rape me. Maybe he's going to try to convince me to have sex. I really don't know. I can't say, what he was going to do. I can tell you the way that I interpreted it and my grandmother interpreted it.
So after a few minutes of knocking on the door, he just went away?
He went away, and I was terrified. I said, I don't know how I'm going to face him. I don't know what I'm going to do when I see him, because I knew I had to see him the next day. There was a big press conference, and my grandmother said, I don't see any good coming out of this from you. You can go to your news director and tell her. You can go to the station manager or the owner, but this is the governor of Arkansas. You're a young woman, you're vulnerable. If you feel like this is just too much for you, then, let's find you another job and get away from this person. It was just the final straw. And after staying up most of the night and discussing it with my grandmother, I decided then and there that I was going to leave the station. I wasn't going to be part of that anymore. I couldn't.
Why didn't you go to your news director, a woman, Karen Farris? Why didn't you tell her about this?
I started to on several occasions. I felt I was ashamed. I was scared. I was mortified. Even though I had the position I had, I was a very naive young woman. And I just couldn't bring myself to, you blame yourself even on some level. I'm like, did I do something to make him think this? Why is he singling me out? Why is he doing this to me? Have I done something? And of course the answer to that is no. We all know that that's a very common thing that people that are sexually assaulted feel. They wonder and doubt themselves. And I did that. But I was assured by my family, you didn't do anything wrong. Unless you want things to progress, who knows what's going to happen with him? Let's just move you away.
In the beginning, when you say he first singled you out, did he give you anything of his during the initial, let us say, flirtation? How did he act toward you?
He did. He gave me, there was a bridge dedication, I believe, and we met with the governor of Oklahoma and Arkansas. It was a bridge between the two states. And he took his tie and he cut it in half and he signed it and he gave me a piece of his tie and he said, "You need to keep this because I'm going to be president of the United States someday and you're going to really wish that you had paid more attention to me and given me more attention." And he said it in a very off-the-cuff way. I also had another incident where I had my reporter's notebook that I took notes on every day, and it was sitting on my desk in the newsroom one day. And he came up, and my name was written, Leslie, on it. And he came up and wrote Clinton on top of my name. And I said, "What are you doing, giving me an autograph now?" And he said, "No, I just wanted to show you how good Clinton looks on top of Leslie."
Why now? We're in the heat of a presidential campaign. You waited decades. Why are you coming out today?
I'm very comfortable where I'm at now in life. I almost came out during the Monica Lewinsky and Kathleen Willey situation. I watched that unfold a little bit. I was very prepared to go forward then and talk about it. And I watched the way the Clintons and Hillary slandered those women, harassed them, did unthinkable things to them. And I just did not want to be part of that. I had very small children at the time. I had a job in pharmaceuticals. It was a very conservative situation. I didn't want to do anything to bring harm to my career and my family. It was very scary watching all of that. And I've shared that with some of the other women that have been the victims. I just didn't want to go through that at that time. It was more about my kids, than anything.
What about critics who will say that you're just trying to impact the election?
I'm not. This was a long time coming. This is something that I've considered doing actually since the 90s. It seems like a good time to talk about it because I think there's still no accountability in the media for the behavior of the Clintons. And if it affects the media and affects the election, so be it. I'm sure I'm not the only woman that went through this kind of thing with Bill Clinton. So I hope it encourages other women, and I hope the millennials and the younger people that were not around and don't remember what happened and what Bill Clinton did and has done, his legacy of sexual deviance in his behavior. It's never really been, yes, he's been impeached, yes, he's been disbarred, but still the man, doesn't admit or, acknowledge many of his victims. So I'm happy if somebody gets that and understands and it affects the election, then great. It should.